Those of you who are raised Jewish already know the importance of Shabbat or Sabbath, which is supposed to be a weekly occurrence. I love how it's personified in the liturgy as a guest that you're inviting into your home and into your life. Shabbat comes from the Hebrew root shin bet tav, to cease what one is doing or simply to rest. After all, even God needed a break after the busyness of creating the world in 6 days. In the ministerial world, most contracts allow for a settled minister to take a sabbatical after serving for 4 years, accruing 1 month per year. Not that we ministers don't get days off during the week, but those weekly opportunities for recharge may not be enough. An extended period of rest can really do the body and the spirit and the psyche good. My colleague once said that it took him the first month of his sabbatical to finally stop dreaming about church. Because it's true that ministry is not just about clocking in and out, and it's not that kind of job. When you're involved with congregants' lives so intimately, it could become all-consuming. At the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, where I used to work, it's you get a sabbatical after 7 years. And that sabbatical is about 3 months total. And boy, was I ever ready to take mine during the summer of 2022. Talk about being crispy after those 7 years of working at the UUA. And also after the pandemic lockdown and that nasty divorce process I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. Remember that? Well, it felt like what was happening during that time was I was simply closing the lid on my laptop without doing a full reboot. So, how would I go about taking this sabbatical? I asked myself at the time. I know for some, it's spending a good chunk of time locked up in a cabin in the middle of nowhere to write a book. Gee, that sounds like your former minister, Mark Morrison Reed, doesn't it? But for me, I wanted to go around the world. So, being the methodical person that I am, I started a spreadsheet a year before my trip, piecing together all the frequent flyer miles I accumulated and all the points from hotels that I gathered together, and of course, saving up enough money to take this trip of a lifetime. Now, the primary criteria I used to pick where I wanted to go was places that are described as thin places. It's where there's a thin veil separating the natural and the spiritual world. You know, places like Stonehenge, Easter Island. I think you get the drift. I had to look at other people's top 10 lists and find out, and I found out during that process that different people had different definitions for what qualifies as thin places, and that some of those places were easier to get to than others. For example, I had to cross off Mecca from my list since, as a non-Muslim, I couldn't even buy a plane ticket to get there. So this obviously isn't a travelogue. We don't have that kind of time. I'm not going to go through every single country that I went to or selected because there were 45 of them that I went to in 90 days. I would, however, characterize the majority of the places I picked as a religious naturalist's dream come true. I define thin places as the natural world exuding its spiritual essence. So, what made my list were places like the Great Barrier Reef down under, which was my first stop, or Victoria Falls in South Africa. which includes this picture of me almost falling down the falls and crossing that rainbow bridge, as they say. I even framed this picture of me jumping off the edge of the world near Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where you could almost hear the pin drop all the way across that canyon that you see there. It was quite spectacular, but I must say, not quite ready for prime time tourism. I was so scared that I was going to be left there by my tour guide, but that's another story altogether. And you know what surprised me the most? Unlike my colleague, it didn't take me a whole month to forget about work. It was more like the plane ride from LA to Sydney. I, I'm kidding, of course, but it's amazing how healing nature can be almost instantaneously. The moment I hit the waters of the Great Barrier Reef, I could already feel my tension melt away as I snorkeled with the fish and other sea creatures. It made me feel so insignificant compared to the wide vastness of what I was swimming with the ocean and everything, yet so connected to the vastness of the universe. That was my first lesson, is to humble myself and surrender to life writ large. There's so much of the world I haven't covered yet, and so many creatures with so much wisdom to share with me. Humans are but a tiny speck of dust in the overall scheme of things. Another major lesson or two came when I walked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, which I know a couple of you have done. Here's what I wrote on my Facebook page on my last day. And for context, by the way, I did not do the full route, which would have taken me a whole month. I cheated and just did a 1 week version of the Camino. Here's what I wrote. And just like that, my 133-kilometer pilgrimage comes to an end, not with fanfare and big welcome signs and confetti dropping from the heavens, but with a sea of peregrinos or pilgrims sitting on the cathedral plaza, staring at that imposing architecture, while others formed a long line around the corner. That's the picture on your right there, waiting to participate in the pilgrims' mass inside. The end was actually the beginning, since my plane landed in Santiago de Compostela before hopping on a bus to Sarria, only to walk back again. And isn't that how life goes? El camino es el camino. The journey is the journey. I hope those of you who have done this and have had a profound experience don't take offense to what I'm about to say. And I don't mean to yuck on anybody's yum. But for me, this has been a both and kind of experience. Just like the Camino offers both smooth and rough surfaces, uphill climbs and downhill descents. While I enjoyed moments of mindfulness, the stunning vistas and landscapes and the smell of the rolling fog, pine, and eucalyptus trees, it was inescapable to pass by agrarian areas where I encountered the smell of horse, cow, dog, and sometimes human manure, which offended my poor olfactory. It was also interesting for me to note how some people simply cannot escape their distractions and feel a need to blast loud music, and I'm talking about the non-spa relaxing genre types, on their phones, singing along with it like they're at a karaoke bar and subjecting the rest of us to listen to their music as well. And there was also a group of 4 young people who seemed to truly get into it by praying the rosary and chanting a liturgy along the way. Both and. I get that we each have our own Camino to take. Originally, people took this path to visit the relic of St. James and ask for penance along the way. These days, I feel like the world could use a collective mea culpa moment for all that we have done to harm one another and our environment. Forgive us, for we have been so distracted with our addiction to social media. It has become so difficult for us to socialize in real time with real people, or to simply enjoy the path we're on by being present. Forgive me for being so judgmental of others and their choices while they're walking this Camino. I know many have had life-changing experiences when they embark on the Camino. Maybe I had high expectations that it would do the same for me, but I discovered that my life changed anyway, especially during these past 2 years, because that's what life does on a daily basis if we allow it to, and if we pay enough attention to the changes when they actually happen. How do we handle changes? How do we engage with the lessons that come along the way? How do we listen to what the divine is trying to tell us without drowning out the noise? Those questions are more interesting to me than a bracketed spiritual experience for a week or even a month. How fortunate I have been to engage with mentors, colleagues, families, both biological and logical, a spiritual director, and a therapist who have journeyed with me all along my Camino, especially during the rocky and uphill parts. That, for me, is my ongoing spiritual practice. For now, my Camino didn't end at that cathedral. It goes on even as my legs and feet begin to recover from the blisters and sores. Thus endeth my Facebook entry. I'm grateful and recognize the privilege of having taken that sabbatical. Part of my realization during that Camino journey is that we don't need to travel all over the world to get a similar experience. An inward pilgrimage can be done from where we are right this very second. All it takes is us hitting our internal reset button and to pay attention to life and to tune out whatever distractions we may encounter along the way. That's what the past couple of weeks of heavy wintering has perhaps provided us with. Perhaps it's Mother Nature's way of getting us to slow down. While some of our cars were snowed in and buried, or while we got news from the city that it'll take 3 weeks for them to clear out our roads and our streets, some of us took this as an opportunity to stay home and hibernate, to order in, to snuggle up with our four-legged friends, to grab a good book or catch up on our Netflix queue. Gasp, perhaps we can even take a sabbatical from our social media or tech devices overall. You know, people pay beaucoup bucks to retreat centers to do just that. There are so many things in life that threaten to drain and zap our life force out of us on a daily basis. A Sabbath, a day of rest, gives us the opportunity to buck that trend and pay attention to what our spirits are really longing for, which is simply to be. Go ahead, give yourself a break. Enter the nap temple that Jordan mentioned earlier during our meditation. You deserve it. As you engage in that inner pilgrimage, I bid you all buen camino. Let us now take a few deep breaths in silent reflection